It's a beautiful spring morning here in Tasmania, and I've come down here to this newer area where I work also with the hens to plant pumpkins today. Now, it's only going to be the second crop that I've grown in this area. The first crop that I grew was last year, the chickpeas. Speaking in terms of a production crop, of course, over the winters I have planted oats in this section and then have let the hens in. And the hens completely get rid of the nice green oats. They feed on that and they leave behind their fertiliser. Now, I came through here a couple of weeks ago with the rotary hoe and just broke that up just to stir that chook manure into the ground a little bit. Now, as I said, I'm going to be planting pumpkins. I always wait in terms of planting pumpkins until the weather is reasonably warm, which is what it is now, and the nights too are not getting so cold. This is the time, when the flower garden is looking fantastic, everything is coming out and moving. You know that the vegetation is ready to go, and the seeds that you plant are not going to be inhibited by cold soil, but are going to actually germinate and grow really quickly, because pumpkins, like corn, really love that heat. Now, I probably would have even planted these a week ago if I had been able, but I was struggling with some sciatic problems earlier in the week, and I actually had to get Elizabeth and the children to help me get the tomatoes into the ground because they really had to be planted, and they also planted some corn as well. I had to play the role of supervisor that day. But today I'm doing better and I'm looking to get these pumpkins in. Now, normally I have utilised the green waste compost and just put down a pile of green waste compost, some blood and bone, and then planted the pumpkins into those. Today I'm running really short of green waste compost. I have a small amount left, but not enough really to do this and some of the other things that I need to do. And I've been informed by my supplier that they may not have any for up to a month. So I have to look at another way. What I'm going to use is my own compost that I make, my lazy compost as I term it. Now, because it has live seeds in it, I don't want to just put it on the surface and use it the way I would with the green waste compost, because doing it like that would mean that I would get a lot of weed germination. So I'm thinking that what I'll do is dig it into the soil a little bit with the fertilizer. Then I'll come with the little green waste compost I have and actually just cover that so that I have basically buried, in a way, my own compost, and use that little bit of green waste compost just for the seed germination. So I followed my compost with some potassium because pumpkins really do love potassium. If you want to grow really good pumpkins, usually have a good fire in the location first and then plant them, and they will grow really well. So I'm using some commercial potassium here, but if you have ash from a fireplace, that's fantastic and probably the better choice. I've also came and added a fair amount of blood and bone because this soil is still, I think, a little bit on the poor side. So I'm being quite generous and I'm hoping to get a good crop off this area. Once I got those down, I mixed that in really well with the fork hoe and also shaped it up a little bit to actually contain some of the moisture that might come, so it's not just going to run away. So I then came along and added just one good shovelful of the green waste compost to the top. So the purpose of this is to be the place that I actually plant the seeds. The seed that I'm planting is a sweet grey pumpkin, which is the same pumpkin that I grew for the last 2 years now, and it's a pretty good keeping pumpkin. Last year I had 9 mounds or 9 plants that I grew, and I harvested around about 22 pumpkins off those, which wasn't a fantastic harvest, but it has been quite good across winter. I think we have about 1.5 pumpkins left now. Here I've got 13 mounds that I've put in, so hopefully I'll get more this year, but we won't count them until they're harvested. So 3 seeds, and just pushing those in a little way, covering them over, and that'll give us some pumpkins. So I've got the rest to plant.
Let's go.
Okay, Samuel.
I can plant some.
You're going to do some?
I'm gonna
1, 2, 3. You push them down nice and deep. Yep, and then just cover them over. See, cover the holes over. Now, while we've put 3 seeds into each mound, I will come back and make sure once they start to grow that there's only 1 growing. So I will have to thin them out if they all come up. But planting 3, seeds plentiful, it guarantees that you're going to get 1 good successful plant. I just grow 1 type of pumpkin. The advantage of doing that is that you can actually keep your own seed and keep it pure. If you grow different types of pumpkin together, of the same species especially, they are going to actually hybridize, and if you keep your seed, you're going to end up with something a little bit different. I've used the green waste compost, as I said, to control the weed growth right where the seeds are, to control it around the immediate vicinity and to give the pumpkins a head start, also to keep some moisture into the ground. I'm going to mulch around this with first some newspaper and then some straw to keep the newspaper in place, and that will stop this compost that I put in of my own from germinating a lot of seed and competing with the pumpkins. At least that's what I hope. Now that I've got the bulk of these in place, I've decided to get the sprinkler out and start it up this end, because there's a bit of wind around today. It's played havoc with me actually trying to get the newspaper in place, and if I don't get this settled down with a bit of moisture, it's going to come in here probably later and blow the straw around a bit. So some water's called for, and I need that for germination anyway, because there's no rain expected in the near future. So some water will do the job. Now these are mostly going to be watered by this method, by overhead sprinkling, and of course any rain that we get. So that should get probably around about 6 mounds up that way and settle that end down nicely. You can see some of the wind coming through now, it's blowing the water at me. So I've still got a few in this end to finish off, but I'll get those done in a moment. Now, while it's taken me the bulk of the morning to actually do this job, I really don't mind, because growing these pumpkins can contribute a considerable amount of our food, and it's really worthwhile doing, because pumpkins are a food that if they've grown right and the right variety will keep long term, they're a really good staple. I still have one more thing to do in here though after I finish these, and that is to plant some pole beans. Along the fence here I want to experiment with growing some that will give us some dried beans that we can use for winter. Now that's going to be this afternoon. I'll finish this off, go have some lunch, and then this afternoon I'll come back and see what we can do with those beans. All right, I'm back. Now the sprinkler's done a good job and most of this is nice and damp now. So as I said, I'm going to plant some pole beans, and my intention is to grow them along this area parallel with this fence. As the name suggests, they need something to climb on. There's lots of things that you can use. It just depends on your circumstance. A tripod type structure, teepee it's sometimes called, is really easy to create if you've got the round space. So I probably could fit one here, but rather than do that, I've decided to actually create a line here. Now I'm not going against the fence directly, because I don't want things climbing over and falling down the other side, which would then allow possums and so on to climb up them. So I'll step it back from the fence. To get some poles to climb on, I'm going over here into the forest to get some timber right next door. It's nice and close. A reciprocating saw is a great tool for this type of job, because it's really too small for getting the chainsaw out. This is just nice, much quieter, and you don't have to bother starting it. And much easier than the handsaw, of course. Well, it's a pretty wild construction. It looks rather strange. I've left a lot of these branches and leaves on because I figured that there's no point cutting them off because they simply give more structure for the beans to climb on. Look, I believe it'll last the season, but time will tell. This dogwood I find dries quite hard and strong. I have actually used it for handles from time to time and quite like it for that actually, because it's often straight and smooth like this one. I think it'll do this job fine. Now, what I'm planting is some scarlet runner beans. These are sometimes called 7-year beans because they're a perennial bean. They look very much like a pinto bean, if you're familiar with those. Now, you can actually harvest these as a green bean if you like them. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the flavour as a green bean. I find the flavour's a little bit unusual. So here they're going to be using mostly vertical space, very small ground space, and I'm really going to be interested to see what I can produce off this. My nephew grows beans like this. I have only ever grown these as a green bean, but he recommends them very strongly as a dried bean, so I'm going to give it a go. Now, look, I'll plant a couple at the base of each of these, and I think that'll be plenty. So I'm just pushing them into the ground. Really simple. Now, you will notice that I put some blood and bone into the soil. I think that that little bit of extra nutrition won't hurt in this soil. Give them a bit of a boost. Get them going nice and early. So that's this area set up for the season. I will put a little bit more water in the middle here. It didn't get quite as much. But apart from that, it's all ready to go. And I think it really should do well because with these metal walls around, it's really quite hot in here. I can really feel the intense heat of the sun this afternoon. And the air, while it's windy, it's a lot less windy down here and quite hot. So the beans are going to love that, and the pumpkins too. It won't take many weeks and this will be completely covered with pumpkins, and I'll bring you back and let you have a look at it.